Good evening. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Board of Finance for Thursday, February 13th, 2020 to order. This meeting is considered a special meeting largely because it's being held on a separate night than we typically would do. Usually we would do the third Monday, and then we usually would then push it because of the holiday to Tuesday, but because we're having budget presentations tonight and we moved it to a different day, we are having a special meeting. So this will have a regular meeting feel to it with our agenda, and then we will have presentations by the town and the Board of Education on the budget that will be going to the Board of Finance for deliberation in March. So with that being said, we do have an item on the agenda first, which was added. This is discussion on debt refunding, and I would like to invite Bill Lindsay from Hilltop Securities and Mary Jane Malvesi to MJ to the table to discuss a little bit about the debt refunding that occurred a couple weeks ago that was added to our agenda before we begin with the regular meeting. Good evening.
Okay, thank you for having us. Bob Hartman and I met with Bill Lindsay to discuss the possibility of having some of our bonds refunded, and we found that this was a good time, and Bill will tell you more about it. We are here in front of the Board of Finance just to speak to you about it before we go to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will be passing a resolution to do this, assuming all goes well. The Board of Finance doesn't have any real motion to make because there's no new money being spent, no new authorization. We are just refunding current authorizations, but we wanted to speak with you so that you were aware of what we were doing. I want to thank Bob for working with us on that, and
on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Bob as
well. My pleasure. We saved money.
Yes, thank you for doing that.
We like that.
I'll turn it over to Bill for the specifics.
Thanks, MJ. So, good evening. My name is Bill Lindsay. I represent the firm of Hilltop Securities. Our office is next door in Madison. And so we're here tonight to talk about a nice opportunity to save the town some money on its existing bonds. You all, I believe, have copies of the presentation that I put together. It's brief, so if you don't mind, I'd like to go through it a little bit, sure. If we could, just to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about here. Beginning on page 1, what you've got here is a 2-year trend of the 20-year spot yield for municipal bonds. And so, I know in the financial markets you hear a lot about equities, you hear a lot about taxable treasuries, you probably don't hear as much about municipal bonds. I just wanted to touch on that a little bit as to why we have the opportunity that we have, and then we'll get into the specifics of the opportunity. So here on page 1, it's the 20-year spot yield. MMD is an acronym for Municipal Market Data. It's a company that puts out daily benchmarks for the municipal market. And here what you can see is where rates have gone really in the last 12 months. So the far right-hand side, where we are today, about 1.65% at 20 years for 20-year money, compared to about 125 basis points higher back in January of 19, so about a year ago from now. Really, there's been two kind of main drivers of these lower yields in the municipal market over the last 12 months. The first is an imbalance in supply and demand. If you recall, the Jobs Act in January of 2018 did two things. It eliminated the ability of state and local governments to refinance bonds ahead of their stated maturity call date. So we refer to it as advance refunding. That was roughly about a third of the municipal market on an annual basis. So a third of that supply went away with the Jobs Act. The second thing the Jobs Act did, and I'm sure you're well aware of, is put a cap on state and local tax deductions on your federal income taxes. And so what we've seen here is the lack of supply from that loss of bonds, coupled with the increased demand for people trying to recoup the money that they cannot save on their federal income tax by that tax write-off, putting money to work in the municipal market, specifically tax exempts, really has created an opportunity where we've seen bond prices go up and yields go down. I try to give you a better historical perspective. If you turn to page 2, call your attention to two charts here. First, in the upper left-hand side, so this is the yield curve. We just looked at the one maturity, the 20-year spot yield Up in the upper left here, that's the whole yield curve, years 1 to 30. And you can see the green line is where we were a year ago this time, January of 19, versus the blue line where we are today, January of 20. Again, the long end of the yield curve, we're down about 125 basis points. The chart that I like best, though, is at the bottom, the maximum and minimum of the yield ranges over a much longer time horizon. This is a 20-year time horizon. And so here what we've got is the entire yield curve, 1 to 30 years, and the range where each of those maturities, the yield on each of those maturities has been in a 20-year period. So the blue-gray shaded areas represent the max and the min. You can see the green areas represent the last 2 years, clearly at the bottom of the yield spectrum over that 20-year time horizon. Then if you look at the blue line, that's where we were at the end of January. In some cases, we've set 20-year lows, specific maturities as much as 40-year lows in the municipal market. So that gives you an idea of why we kind of have the opportunity that we have. And now I'll talk about the specifics for the transaction for Guilford. So what we're looking to do here on page 3 is refinance about $26.5 million of prior bonds. Talk about which specific bond series in a moment, but just a quick, a refresher on terminology here. When we think about refinancing, the best acronym is usually refinancing our home mortgage, right? So I'm sure we've all done that fairly recently. But in the case of our home mortgage, we can go to the bank at any point in time and exchange the prior rate, higher rate for a lower rate. Not so much with municipal bonds. When we sell municipal bonds, we sell them with an optional redemption date, the option being at the option of the issuer or the town, but we say that we will refinance the bonds beyond that specific date, the maturities beyond that date, and we state that when we sell them. So we need to be within 90 days or beyond after that optional redemption date or call date in order to refinance the debt, okay? And so specifically what we're looking at here is two sets of bonds that we're looking to currently refinance. One was from 2014. It was the first issuance for the new Guilford High School. And we're looking at the maturities of 2021 to 2024. The call date on this particular issue is going to be August of 2020. And then the second series of bonds we're looking at is from 2012. It's about $8.3 million of bonds. Similar maturities, 2021 to 2028. What's interesting about this 2012 series is this was a prior advance or funding, a point in time where state and local governments were able to actually refinance the bonds in advance of that call date. So this will be the second time we've refinanced these particular bonds. The 2012 series had refinanced prior issues or original issues that were as early as 2002 and then 2008. So on page 4, begin to talk about what the savings looks like, some summary of the transaction, if you will. So first, again, prior bonds we're looking at refinancing, about $26.5 million. Under the current bond pricing, we'd be issuing something around $23 million to take out those bonds. The effective rate on the new debt, so again, we've got 15 serial maturities that we would be selling. Instead of talking about 15 different maturity coupon rates, the effective rate, the single rate that's the average rate, if you will, over that 15 years is about 1.6%. So obviously very low. The savings that we'd be generating with this transaction, a cash flow savings about $2.5 million, just over 2.5, and we've got the cash flow savings on the next page. If we present value those future savings back to today, it's about $2.3 million. Those net present value savings, when we consider that as a percentage of the prior bonds, is about 8.7%. That's important because the Government Finance Officers Association has put out best practice guidance that recommends governments only refinance debt when they're above 3% net present value savings. So we're almost 3 times that best practice here. If you turn to page 5, this will give you the actual cash flow savings. So again, in aggregate, $2.5 million over the next 15 years. It starts out about $200,000 of savings in 22 through 29, and then steps down when the first series of bonds that we're refinancing would have been redeemed, and then going out to 35, it's somewhere around $130,000 a year. Logical question, I think, is in the upcoming year, 2021, the savings is only $72,000. Why is that versus the later years? It's really a function of the bonds maturities that we're actually refinancing. So I said earlier, the call date on those bonds is August of 20. So the August of 20 maturity is not callable. We're not refinancing that here. We're refunding August of 21 and out. And so the savings begins August 21, which is the beginning of 21-22 fiscal.
I'll just add that that potential savings for '21 is already reflective in the budget we're presenting this evening.
And then the last slide, what we did is we overlaid what the savings would be on with your overall your debt profile here. And so just to give you a sense as to where we're going, even though the savings in the upcoming fiscal year 21-22, it's interest savings only because, again, those bonds are non-callable. The 21-22 has always been the peak year of the financing plan as related to the debt for the high school. So there is some good synergy here because that's when the savings is stepping up in the peak year of the projected debt service.
I have a question regarding that. Just when I was looking at 21-22,
Yeah.
I saw the 2021, I thought this upcoming year was going to be the peak on the high school. When I look at the existing debt, there's another, 21-22, there's another increase. Is that due to the high school, or because now 21-22 this would be the peak year?
2021 has always been the peak.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at that, it's not taking into account the premiums
Okay.
that we're adjusting it for.
All right.
Yes, and thank you, Mary Jane. So on the
It looks
at
a
the
little,
bottom,
yeah, the
foot-
perception
yeah,
of that looks a
it
little
is.
bit different than.
And that's why we added the footnote at the bottom as it relates to both the current year and the upcoming fiscal year, because those numbers are artificially, I think, a little artificially low
Okay.
because of the premium that you received on the new money issuance being used to offset the debt service in those
Okay.
years.
Right.
So this
But you're correct, 2021 is indeed the
is the peak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It just means that this will be, for the next fiscal year, it'll be a greater savings because of the interest.
Absolutely, yes.
Great.
Due to the refunding, yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Great.
It seems to me that the change has been pretty volatile, particularly over the last month. Is there a risk of it going back up between now and when we actually conclude the refunding?
I can't, obviously, I can't,
Right,
first,
right.
I can't guarantee it. My expectation,
crystal
though,
ball.
is no. Again, the biggest driver of higher bond prices and lower yields for us has been the supply and demand. We're at 58 straight weeks of positive inflows in municipal bond funds. It was 2.1 billion of inflows this past week, which is a very strong number. The new issue, the volume that's been coming out, the expectation was that it was going to ramp up with these historic low rates, and that has not materialized. So absent, I think, a big push in new money bond issuance, I think we're going to stay fairly range bound here.
And what's the timetable to conclude this from when the Board of Selectmen acts on it?
That's a great question. It'll be in the next 60 days. We need to prepare the official statement. We need to go get credit ratings. We need to and then price and then settle. We can't again with the current refunding opportunity. We can't settle on the bonds, close on the bonds until. We have to be within 90 days of the call date, which is August of 20. So the soonest we can close would be May of 20. So that's the schedule that Mary Jane and I are working towards to make sure that we close on that. And what we're doing is we're going to decide, work with the underwriter for the transaction when we actually price relative to that May settlement.
So I remember years back when we were purchasing the high school, this was a very big reason why I supported the purchase of the high school, because the low interest environment made it really ripe for us to take on such a big bond issue. and I never would have thought that the interest rates would even get lower. I'm wondering, do you think this like low interest rate environment is the new norm, or do you think someday it's going to spring back to historical average?
That's a great question. I think we're going to be in a low interest rate environment for a while. In particular, the Federal Reserve has done a very good job of managing inflation, which is usually the driver of the long end of the yield curve. And so, as a result, I think through their efforts, they've kept inflation very tame and under control. And so I don't expect a big spike as it relates to that. Again, the supply is going to be another major consideration here. With the loss of the ability to do advanced refinings on a tax-exempt basis, that was a third of the market that went away. So, based on that, I think we're going to be in this environment for a little while.
I would agree.
Okay. Any other questions? Bob, again, thank you.
My pleasure.
Answer all your questions.
I've been involved from the beginning, so I'm okay with all of this. I will point out, though, that this is 25% of our bonds, so we can keep going. In terms of other things, interest rate outlook, we're still, most of the developed world is still well below us, if not negative. There is actually a risk that we might go that way, too. So the opportunities remain strong.
So the next step is the selectmen have on their agenda for Tuesday a resolution to move us forward. And they're here to hear the presentation tonight, so we should be all set to do so.
Seems like it won't be a tough decision.
Probably, that's,
Kind of a no-brainer, I would say.
well, that's what we were saying too, but you never know.
Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention and adding it to our agenda tonight.
Thank you.
So that we can learn more. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda, public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Seeing none. Approved minutes of the regular meeting of January 21st, 2020.
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections? Revisions? I didn't see any.
Great job.
Move their approval.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Correspondence, item number 3 in the agenda, Pension Committee.
Question, nothing from the standing building?
No, Standing Building actually moved their meeting to Tuesday, the 11th, so they were 2 days ago. So we'll get their minutes a bit delayed, but we'll get them for next month. And actually, in March, we should have a liaison from the Standing Building Committee here, based on the coordination of last month. Anything on pension? I don't think I have anything. Nope.
I think I have one question.
On pension?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Linda's quoted as saying that you would hope to have this totally funded by the end of this year, your contribution.
You're talking about
Where's
the
that?
recommended
Page
to
4?
the Board of Education to fully fund the pension plan this
Yeah.
year, was in the pension
For the
minutes.
upcoming budget for the 2021, I'm not sure.
It said this year, that's why a little confusing.
I,
Linda stated that you recommended to the BOE to fully fund the pension plan this year.
yeah, what we
You
were
meant the
talking about was the
new budget
funding
year.
for the
In
2021 budget.
In the upcoming
In the
budget.
upcoming budget, and the Board of Education did add funds to the superintendent's
that.
budget to fully fund
Right.
the recommended contribution.
Which is what we saw in the revised paperwork.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's something that probably should get back to them, that it's not for this year, but for the upcoming budget year. Okay. Great. Thanks for clarifying that, actually. Okay. Nothing else on pension. Item number 4, review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2020. Linda. And Dick Hirsch is up. Hey, you got to do the report this month.
Get to the report.
All right.
You have in front of you the summary of the report, and let me just point out a few of the apparent anomalies, but which can be easily explained. The expenditures for the month of about $7 million says that we've 55% of our budget versus an expenditure of 52 last year. And that's because there was an additional payroll in January. There's 3 payrolls in January this time. In terms of employee benefits, we're showing an expenditure higher than the prior year because we're making larger contributions for pensions this year. On tuition, the percentage of budget expended is lower than prior year, which brings glee to, but it's only momentary. It's 25% lower than last year, but
We have a higher budget.
it can change
You have a higher
tomorrow.
budget. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
with one case, so.
It's a skewed number because it's not comparable to last
Exactly.
year. Yeah.
The percentage of budget on capital is higher than prior year because, in fact, of summer projects that we did, which are now advance payments. Transportation is higher than last year, in large part because the timing of the payments for the buses. And I think those are it's pretty much timing explains most of the differences.
I had a couple of things here, but just a bit of an anomaly was the unemployment compensation, which is very low. Is that going to continue? Do we have being where it is right now, it's not a huge amount, but
I am not aware of anything at this time that's coming up. We never know when sometimes we're going to get
Right.
filings, especially if it's from somebody who is a coach or a substitute. But we only pay based on our actual claims, we're not a rate-based payer, so hopefully it'll stay that way and we'll keep that little bit of extra funds.
I'm just curious, is that appropriation going to be the same in this upcoming budget? That, is it 40,000?
Yes,
yeah, to
yes,
be safe, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because you don't ever
We
really know, but
we never really know,
but we're
and,
more than halfway through the year, so
Right.
it's good, but
right.
never know.
We've
And then-
had years where we've been good through 6 months, and then you get 1 or 2 high claims, and it takes away most of your budget.
Do we keep it flat, or do we look at a historical average?
It was kept flat in the upcoming budget.
Questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I have a few questions on the spreadsheets. The certified and non-certified salaries both gone up to 7 to 8% over last year. Is that because of a timing issue, or
Yes.
Extra
or
payroll.
did we hire
It's-
any more people?
no, it's all-
overtime, or what?
It's all the extra, there was an additional payroll. The way our payrolls fell, there were 3 payrolls in January as opposed to 2.
I see.
It'll even out, I think in March, it'll even out again. In March, we have 3 payrolls.
I also noticed that you're 25% over expended for the year on legal.
Yes. We had a number of negotiations earlier in the year, as well as some labor issues and special education legal. It's tapered off a little bit. We do have one upcoming negotiation in the spring, so it will be, well, it's already over budget. It will be over budget for the year.
So you don't know about how much?
If I had to guess right now, I'm saying it's going to be about $30,000, $30,000 to $40,000 over budget. Is my current projection.
These were like unexpected legal entanglements, I presume.
The special education ones, we never really know, and then there were a couple labor issues that came up that were unanticipated. We obviously knew that we were going into contract negotiations with a couple of unions.
I have one last item.
Go ahead.
Noticed in the tuition category, you're way under.
Yes,
Is
It's
Timing again?
It's timing. I handed out the tuition report earlier. We are currently at a projection of $243,000. That is up from last month. We added one new outplacement, but we actually took 2 off. So last month we were at 30. We took 2 off and added 1. We do have 1 more pending, but I don't have the cost. And this will get adjusted for next month when we receive our first allocation of the excess cost payment at the end of this month. So once we know exactly what we're getting, we'll have a better estimate of tuition.
The only other thing that I had, I think, was dues and fees were running over. And it's more a question of, was there a specific reason why dues and fees ran over this year, and do we need, are we looking to, or is the Board of Ed looking to increase that based on that increase for the budget upcoming? It's not by much, but
Yeah.
usually those are pretty, dues and fees are pretty set.
It was adjusted, I don't remember, I don't have the budget in front of me right now. We did adjust some of them for cost increases that we incurred this year.
Well, when the Board of Education does their presentation,
And there,
I'll take a look at that one, see. But, yeah, usually that's a pretty set number, just because you know going into the year, the dues and fees. I didn't know if there was anything that was unexpected, and if there was, I'm sure it's going to be incorporated in the budget.
we
so.
did have one or two companies that, one in particular, that we have 3 different pieces of software through them.
Okay.
And they had an increase of 25%, which we tried to negotiate it down because it came in after the budget was set a year ago. So they've had some very large increases, which has affected this account. That we were notified of the increases after the budget was put together. So we did adjust for that piece of those pieces of software in the new budget.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Travel seems to be going at a higher rate. Is that timing or?
That is actually,
Higher rate than last year, I should
right.
say.
There was a stipend that Dr. Freeman gets for travel, and it was applied to that account. Even though it was paid through payroll as part of his salary, it was charged to that, which it was not last year. So that's the difference.
Okay. And then the other one I had was the telephone. Is it telephone? I think it's telephone. It seems to be a little bit higher. That may just be the timing of the payments as well.
Part of that is due to charges that we are now incurring for the internet at the high school, which we weren't paying for before.
Okay.
The state no longer funds it.
Oh, I think I may have asked you that before.
Yes.
Thank you.
The multiple bills for Eversource for multiple months, is there a reason that we?
Yeah, Eversource didn't send them to us. As hard as that is to believe, there are certain accounts that Eversource is telling us that they have to manually create the bills. And we called them and said, we didn't get the bills. And they said, oh, yeah, okay, we'll take care of that. And they created the bills and sent them to us. So we have asked now, this is the 2nd month that we've had to call them and say, please send the bills. And
What would happen if you didn't call?
I was thinking that myself.
they'd get shut off.
March, they hit us.
We'd get shut off.
Calling
No.
Eversource.
We probably owe fairness
Okay.
break at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we actually had to call them and ask for bills for, and they're the larger accounts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
There's a couple of these that are,
they're quite large.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I was thinking the expenditures were so much higher this month. In addition to the 3 payrolls, you were hit with multiple months at multiple schools for multiple electric bills.
I'm not sure if it was on the December warrants or it might have been December, because when we were putting together the budget, we realized that there were a number of schools that we didn't have bills for, and that was the first time that we called and said, please send the bills.
Doesn't seem to happen on my account.
No, nor mine.
So is that why electricity seems to be going the wrong way at the moment? I mean, everybody's curious about when Johnson Controls is going to
No.
make us rich.
Part of that electricity going the wrong way this month is the annual payment for the energy performance contract, which was $392,380,000.
There we go.
Do we have a contract with some sort of physical therapy source on these, all these bills that we're getting? It's hard to quantify them. Are they on an annual fee basis with us, or do we just get billed as we need them? I
which
see
vendor-
on pages 11
It just
and
is
12,
physical therapy.
there's maybe a dozen bills, maybe less, but
Bottom of the
they
page.
vary from about a few hundred to.
Yeah,
It's for the month.
there is
Looks like it's for the month.
there is a set rate, and it depends on the number of times they come, how many students are serviced. There is a set rate to the agreement.
Is there a cap on it?
I am not aware of a cap, but I would have to double check on that.
There's a bunch of HVAC repairs, which I'm sure is going to be part of the budget. Do you anticipate there being more emergency repairs like this, or is this the bulk of the work that's been done?
Emergency repairs come up all the time. Until we can replace the system at Lakes, which is
Yep.
the biggest
Problem.
one, we're gonna probably have to keep Band-Aiding it until it gets done, hopefully over the summer.
Yeah, I saw about half of those were lakes, if not more.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Baldwin.
And Baldwin.
Baldwin's the other one, yeah. Anything further?
How's that facility needs assessment coming along?
They checked all the references, or some references on the company, and they came back very well that it would be, that the company was capable of handling the needs assessment that we were asking them to do. And I believe the Standing Building Committee was supposed to approve it at their meeting on Tuesday.
If they-
Yes, Standing Building Committee was supposed to approve it on Tuesday, and Sightlines was going to start right away.
That would, and I'm assuming once they approve it, then it goes to the Board of Selectmen, and then contracts run up and they move forward. It was approved on, oh, right, Ted, you were there, yeah. Right, so that's on the agenda, I'm assuming, for Board of Selectmen for the sightlines, for the contract, for the facility assessment. I believe so. I'm sure.
I don't know if it's appropriate for us to comment on the minutes of the Board of Education, but since I was intimately involved in one of them, we did not make $1,450,000 contribution of a treadmill and a mini bike. $1,450.
You look at the 21,
I'm looking at
January 21st.
Board Agenda 8.2. Just a small error.
Board Agenda 8.
That is a $1 million treadmill, huh?
I was the one who donated. I'd like the
So much for
million.
being
I'll take it in
anonymous.
small bills.
Oh, okay.
Peloton?
Think of a treadmill.
I see what you're talking about. Oh,
It's a 40-mile treadmill.
Yeah, well, it's amazing what happens when the decimal is not in the right place.
Couldn't miss that joke.
Anything else for Executive Linda?
But there was one item of cost for the IB testing, it was like 14,000. Does that get reimbursed?
Yes, it does.
Okay, that's what I thought, but.
Yes, it will be reimbursed.
Okay. Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the
You
Board of
do.
Education for the month of January 2020 in the amount of $7,241,667.38?
Who?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions or recusals? Great. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Linda. I'm sure you'll be sticking around. Item number 5, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for January 2020. Mary Jane.
Evening.
I'm back.
Hello again. Revenues?
Revenues are right on track, exactly where we were this time last year. I was at a GFOA meeting today and heard that the State Bond Commission is once again scheduled to have a meeting on July 28th. It's actually looking better that they might pass it on the 28th, according to our sources. They're still saying we would absolutely be getting our money by the end of the year. It's just a matter of when, but hopefully July 28th, they'll make a decision.
Okay.
So that is the reason for the difference in the other departmental state revenue being lower, because we have not received some of those items. Otherwise, what did I say?
July.
Did I say July? I'm sorry, I meant February 28th.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I just thought that was weird.
I didn't even
Wait.
realize it came out that way. Didn't even realize it came out that
Actually,
way.
I missed it.
I-
I was thinking.
You were thinking
I was
February.
like, wow.
I'm sorry.
Session?
I don't even remember saying July, but I obviously did. It's not even my birthday
said it so
yet or something.
confidently.
I was right, yeah.
Maybe we're all ready for July.
Maybe. Thank you, I'm sorry about that. Otherwise, unless you have any questions on revenue?
I can't help but ask, there's a small aberration at the end about boat racks,
Okay.
no revenue. I paid more than no revenue to put my canoes on those damn racks.
This fiscal year?
Yeah. So is this just a timing thing? Or maybe it wasn't this fiscal year.
Typically, we don't bring that revenue in quite yet for
Okay.
this season,
All right.
but,
Are they all paid like in April, May, or June?
yeah, typically, we're not seeing it yet.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
unless
So
you're a
they're probably
go-getter
already
and want to
paid
be
up to
first,
fiscal
and,
year.
you know,
Surf's up?
because
All
remember,
right.
this is since July, so they would have already been
That's
paid
right.
before last fiscal year.
There we are. That
They probably have
answers
to be
that.
paid by the end of, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
If you don't have your boat
Well-
rack by July, you're, you know.
June 30th, take a look at them, see if it's paid.
It's crowded down there.
It is.
But if you get your money in, we'll post that for next month.
I guess I'll ask this one. I mean, it was only $900 or so, but how did our selectman's office bring in 224% of the revenue?
The selectman's office is our catch-all. Very good. There they are. Well, how do you?
Let's do that next year, like for $1 million.
The Board of Selectmen line is really our catch-all for, you know, for a lot of different things. We could sell a small piece of equipment, then it would go in there.
Okay.
So we kind of budget the same amount each time, each year, but it's really, can go up or down. It's really our catch-all.
Sell like your putter or something? Bronze, gold putter?
By request that comes in that we charge 4 copies gets lumped into that number
Oh, wow.
as well.
Copies.
There's a couple other miscellaneous.
It's not bad.
It's shocking.
Well, in good humor, good revenue. Yep.
Anything else on revenue? Expenses?
Similar story on expenses. Most of the departments are pretty much right where they were last year at this time. Not really anything of any real concern. So unless you have a question on any particular line item, I don't have anything specific to report this month.
I didn't have anything. Went pretty normal.
Nothing.
Boring month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
Special
we're done
fund?
with expenses.
Just
We're going to-
for clarification, on the warrants for special funds, the G8, the capital improvement for the synthetic turf, which field is that for? It was $5,000. It says additional infill installation, is that the
That would have been this.
the
Probably-
new
That's
field?
Yeah,
That's
The
for
new field?
yeah. Yeah, they had some info.
Exposure to
Yeah.
And the next one down was the payment for the project management services, I
Right.
believe, right?
Castle
Yeah.
Boost, yeah.
Correct,
The
through Castle
only-
Boost.
The only
Mhm.
question I had on that is, do we expect any more payments on that, or is that the final one? Do we know?
I don't know if their last round of testing is
Yeah.
included in that or not.
They're still providing services?
Right, because they did a test to determine after that additional infill was put in, whether or not it met specifications.
So
And
there
I
might
don't know
be-
whether that, I don't know whether that's. in
Yeah,
there or
I
not.
think we kind of expect at least one more.
Okay.
But the field is in use now.
Oh, yeah.
Field has been.
The field was in use before the infill.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of after the test, we're putting
Correct.
some of the. Okay,
They're working on our behalf, so we want to make sure it's
yeah,
tested properly. Mhm.
okay.
Just curious, looking at the warrants, is the water main project just kind of going as expected and forecast and?
The water main project is actually slightly ahead of project, it's ahead of schedule. and
There's
that
a
I don't wanna-
possibility they're going to be done by July.
Okay. And then the bonding and the recovery of the money is going as planned?
Yep.
Yeah, well, the lease,
that
No
would-
surprises?
the funding is already secured. We haven't used the money yet, but we'll be.
In fact, we haven't even borrowed it yet.
We have- that's what I said, we haven't borrowed it yet.
Or received the funds from the state yet, because we've been using the funds from the water company. You remember their contribution was a total of about $1.5 million, which included some materials as well as straight-up payments. So, and then we have the revolving loan fund, which is already in hand, right?
If I remember, maybe some of our only costs were maybe the borrowing costs and the difference between collecting and when we
Right,
borrowed, a little bit of interest. on
Which is
borrowing.
why I'm holding off as long as possible to use any of those
Yeah,
funds.
so that's good news.
Right,
Yep.
so,
All right, just curious. Kind of a
Yeah.
big- That's kind of a big question. though,
ahead of
so.
schedule at this point.
And those state funds are not part of the bond.
The what?
They don't have to go through the bond council.
No.
Well, to that point, there are $450,000 in state bond money already committed to us out of the previous fiscal year. Someone that you may know is actually helping us secure
Yeah.
additional bond funds.
I might know.
Right.
And-
Additional funds would have to go through there, but the
Right.
ones we have currently
Don't
are not
have to.
subject to this. Mhm.
And those funds would just go to lessen the burden on the residents.
Right, yeah, okay.
Right. Every dollar does that.
Anything else on special funds?
Yeah, I have a question on special fund. How much money has been set aside to renovate that science wing and into a fitness center? What is it, what's the allocation on special fund? What are we expecting?
There's nothing in there at this
We
point.
haven't
Nothing
done
earmarked for
anything
that
yet.
yet.
Nothing's
You
earmarked
mean
yet for
for the
that.
construction of
For
it?
the construction of it?
No.
Nothing.
It's just the design.
We're-
Oh, okay, so
right.
this is
We-
all design money.
Design, correct. We need to determine what the cost is going to
Okay,
be
it's a
before we
preliminary
move forward.
phase, okay.
Yes, all preliminary work. We have not set aside any construction or remodeling money.
To go to that question, though, I can't remember, how much was set aside for the design on that
Yeah.
allocation? Do you remember?
Ooh, I don't remember what the
I know
the total was.
it's part of one of the bonds, isn't it? Or is it? Or is it cash?
I think it was.
Right, we're using bonded funds
We're using
for
bonded
it.
funds, I can't remember which bond it was from, though.
Yeah, but I
And
don't
we went.
remember, I'm afraid I don't remember what the total contract was for that. I
Okay.
could certainly
yeah, if you could
get
just-
that for you. Sure.
Yeah,
Yep,
just so we know how many more are coming.
yep.
Okay. Anything further on special or any warrants? I'm opening it up. Any warrants? Going once. Twice. Before we go to medical. Okay. Medical.
Medical, we had another low month for claims, lower than our anticipated monthly expenses. We,
Not so good on the
right, right, I've
catastrophic.
moved to catastrophic claims.
Yeah.
We have doubled our exposure. We've actually doubled the amount of accounts. Last month, I reported on 3 claims reaching the 75 and 2 claims over the 150, and we're now at 5 for each. So we've doubled the amount of claims. We are at 409,000, which is lower than where we were at this time percentage-wise last year. But we've really jumped in 1 month, so you can see that we're heading in that
Well, I
direction.
do remember last month, I think it was Mr. Trotter brought up.
Yeah,
The whole issue
Got an eye on it.
with the amount and that it was so low, were we gonna, be paying more for the premium? But that kind of showed you that it could jump very quickly, so.
It can go quickly, and that 1.6 can clearly move over to the other column really quickly.
Yeah.
Is it true to say that it's always been worked to our advantage, that we've always recovered more in the claims than we had to pay in the premiums?
As far as I know, yes. I haven't gone back too many
Typically, right?
Yeah.
too many years, but yes.
Was there a
I'm
year-
really curious if we might have a year where it actually,
Not that I recall.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
recall one.
I don't recall either.
Nor do I.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, you were on the board too. So, Charlie, you... Well, the insurance, we keep beating the odds on the insurance company. One of these years, they're gonna get it. It's gonna happen.
According to the insurance consultant, once we hit 70%, we've actually reached the initial goal, wanting to at least reach 70% of our premium. So the fact that we're reaching 100 and over 100% of that premium is,
Yep.
I don't want to say it's good,
No,
because it's not good. because-
it's a prudent move
Right.
on our part,
Right.
but
well,
not good.
it's great if people are healthy
It's
too.
fiscal, right, it's, right.
They would say that, wouldn't they, 70%? Yeah.
I think it's great if people are healthy, but, I kind of wonder if maybe we need to adjust if we think I don't know, if we
Well,
think
we
things are
look-
changing.
We look at those numbers very well every year. Linda and I tell you that every month, that,
We've
we
been on it.
scrutinize those numbers for our budgets, and as you can see from prior years, it has worked out, what we have done. Jason's with us a lot of times. I'm working on the medical too, so.
Do you think there might be any change in behavior now that they're contributing a little more towards medical?
No, if you're.
Not for the
It'd be hard to
catastrophic.
quantify, I'm sure.
If you're within this category,
Yeah, no.
Not for
the amount that you're
catastrophic.
paying
True.
for,
You don't want to be in that category.
you're actually making out, because once you
Yeah,
hit your
'cause you
limit on the
needed
HSA.
insurance,
ri-
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so you're
Absolutely.
actually, HSA works best for two types of people. The person has catastrophic use, whether in prescriptions or health benefits, or the person that just gets a physical every year and doesn't have any. So it's that person in between that doesn't always work out, but the HSA unfortunately is better for this
Okay.
type of.
I think I'm like obsessed with the ISL. We should just move on.
The answer is yes. The HSAs have gone, by design, the HSAs give employees a greater ownership share in managing their healthcare costs. And some of the byproducts of that are regular checkups and more prudent use of it. So we're
Yeah.
traditionally catching things
Kind
earlier.
of the skin in the game, right?
Catching things
theory.
earlier, which is designed to prevent catastrophic costs down the road. Cancer is
Okay.
cancer, but if you can catch cancer early, all right, there's a great likelihood that you can actually beat it if you catch it at the right time.
I wonder if we're on a healthier trend,
And the classic, what is it? 70% of healthcare costs in this country are related to end of life. Is it higher than that, Ken?
About 80%.
Okay. So,
I'm just going to avoid end of life then, I think.
if you figure out how to do that, let me know.
That's all.
May not be your decision.
Anything else on medical? Anything else for Mary? Okay.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of January 2020 in the amount of $2,402,714?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, recusals?
Thank you.
I don't
Thank
feel
you.
right if I don't spend at least $2 million.
Item number 6. Receive proposed Board of Education budget for fiscal year 2020-21. Katie Balstracy, Board of Education Chair. Jason Bowden,
Good evening.
Associate Superintendent. Did I get that right? Associate Assistant. Assistant or Associate?
Assistant.
Assistant.
Chad, when you
And Linda Trudeau's back.
Let me know.
Yeah. I'll work on that one.
Okay.
All right.
The floor is all yours.
Excellent. Excellent.
Excellent.
Good evening. We are very excited to be here to present the Board of Education budget to the Board of Finance. Just to remind you kind of where we've been over the last few months. So we started this process in September. This is involving superintendent, district leadership team, et cetera. In October, end of October, the Board of Education holds a public forum. There is no proposed budget for the public to react to at that time, but it does allow the community to come to the Board of Ed and note interest in having us pay attention to particular areas of funding that could impact the budget. We met in December with all of you, the Board of Finance, which allows us to start to explain to you the direction we're heading in. In January, we received a proposed budget from Dr. Freeman. We had a second meeting with the Board of Finance, 2 public forums at the end of January that allow us then to hear directly from the public on specific items in the proposed budget. And then at the beginning of this month, the Board of Ed met twice and voted, deliberated, made some adjustments, and voted to put this particular budget forward to all of you tonight. So I am going to turn this over to Mr. Bowden. We're going to start going through this short slide presentation to really introduce this budget to you.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci. When we build our budget on the Board of Education side, we start with a macro view with our vision and our mission statements and look at them and say, what are the integral parts of that? And just a refresher for you, it's been a year since you've seen this slide, that the pie chart in the middle really reflects where our focus is each year. The expert instruction, effort and academic rigor in our curriculum, the leadership we have not only at the district level, but through the buildings and in the classrooms, developing that, and our development of professional learning communities within the district. We then take that and build from that, narrow it down a little bit, and our district priorities are developed, and you'll see that those begin to flesh out the vision and mission statements, such as our schools will be physically and emotionally safe, that teaching and learning will be supported by instructionally focused leadership, and that our students will be engaged in academically rigorous tasks in every class. From that, we go from the priorities to initiatives. Again, narrowing it down even farther and fine-tuning it. You'll see the school climate issue there. You'll see that we promote in classroom environments and task designs and instructional strategies that foster emotional health of our students. That's been a key area of our budgetary process the last few years. Again, developing and maintaining and increasing professional learning opportunities, both within the classroom and at the building level and district level, supporting the new STEM instruction initiatives that have come through in the new science standards, and deepening our understanding of what we believe to be really effective high leverage practices to be used in the classroom. And again, something really important that ties into the socio-emotional health of our students, to employ effective and balanced assessments to monitor student learning. From that, we get into our budget assumptions. The areas in black type are ones that we've talked about already, from starting with the vision and mission, moving down. But I'm going to center again on the blue center section, which breaks out again the fact that we're looking at social emotional wellness, looking at our professional learning structure, supporting the science standards and STEM, and again, working on effective high leverage practices in the classroom. The last element that we look at in terms of our budget development is really enrollment. And we're seeing here this year a substantial drop at the high school, at the middle school, with modest gains at Baldwin and K4 and PK. Now that's important because we've had bubble classes moving through, and at times in prior years, we've had to add staff at the elementary levels when we've had kindergarten classes that came in higher than expected. Each year, we look at our enrollments in both the middle grades and the high school to see if we have any opportunities there to repurpose FTEs, if we have at the high school sections of class in a particular area that does not have the enrollment. We tend to take those FTEs mostly on the micro level and adjust them to areas where we need more classes. There's more of a need for student opportunities. So the enrollment this year presents a decline of 73 students total. And the next slide we have is one that we see looks at our projection over the course, and I know the type is small, but it goes back to 2013 on the left all the way to present. And you'll see that that red line, that was from the study that was done approximately 10 years ago that looked at what our student decline would be. The green line is what we actually have seen since 2013. Our decline is not as steep as some of the area or surrounding towns are, but they are declining each year. In recent years, we've seen that normally has not impacted FTEs or full-time equivalents in the classroom because the declines have been so small and spread over 12 grades that typically we haven't lost that many positions. But over the full 10 years now, you can see that we've gone down 353 students, and the 7 years we've gone down that much, and we were projected to be even almost 370 students more than that in that study.
That looks to be about a 10% decline, is that about right?
At Adams, right, specifically?
No, I meant over the
time too, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do want to note from that slide, right, if you notice, right, we're projecting 49 students out of what is now 500, which is why we're going to see in this, you'll see in this budget some FTE reductions at Adams, right? That we're literally losing 10% of the population in that school. And as Mr. Bowden noted, right, where many of our area surrounding districts have been dealing with this for a while, right? I mean, closed elementary schools, et cetera. We have not seen the declines to that same extent or with the same rapidity, but it is really starting to hit us in areas where it's going to require us to respond.
Dr. Balistraci, can some of that reduction in FTE be done through attrition?
That would, you always hope that can be done. We will present to you in a minute, our proposed staffing reductions, and they are a little bit targeted to the English language department at Adams Middle School, but part of that is taking this required step of addressing enrollment with also an opportunity to positively adjust the structure and the schedule of classes at Adams, which is why it is being approached in that manner, and certainly we can talk about that a little more.
It's a little bit of a reorg.
It is, absolutely. It's an opportunity to reorganize in a way that really that aligns us much better with many of our neighboring middle school structures, and also, quite frankly, aligns us with an updated schedule at Baldwin and the high school, which obviously are bookends to the school. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but.
And you may be getting here, but this is the first year a reduction in students has really culminated in a reduction in FTEs. And with a 10% decline year on year, you're looking at reductions in class size. At what point, have you mapped out at what point we're suddenly going to have a big change, where you consolidate, have a big change in FTEs?
It's hard to tell because we have bubbles along the way. So any changes in that structure, you want to mitigate.
Yeah. But in the last 7 years, class sizes at the high school, for example, have fallen from what to what? And at what point do you,
We haven't seen reductions in class sizes at the high school really yet.
That was the interesting thing, that
That's-
if you go back to that
Yeah.
slide and you look at the enrollment, the high school, the one before,
That's reading my question, you have to ask.
the high school really, it's back to where it was in 2013.
Right.
Well, if
Right.
not more, but it went up and it came back down, whereas the others have really, they've bubbled and come down.
but if the middle schools are declining, it's
Yeah,
going to
it's
express
gonna
itself.
eventually
No, that's
get to the
right.
high school.
No, that's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Right,
That's
yeah,
exactly right.
right.
But remember too, so I think it's going to look different, and there's a little bit of wait and see when it gets to the high school, because at Adams, you're dealing with a team structure, right? So students are in a team. There is a group of teachers that teaches that team, whereas at the high school, then you have individual students transferring each period to individual teachers.
Subjects.
Right,
Right.
so it will look a little bit, different there.
And to your question, John, you hope that attrition, anytime you have, a reduction, will take care of what the reduction is. Because the decline has been so slow over the last couple of years, we have often met that attrition, or solved that issue through attrition, because retirements had not filled that position, because there was not a need to. So the culmination of the drop has really hit harder this year than any other year, because it now has created a situation where it's concentrated more in one area.
Okay.
So
I
with
think,
student attrition, you see some faculty reductions. Could you describe those?
Coming up, we will.
Oh.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just,
Yes.
before you move on, we're on enrollment. Is there going to be a plan to do another enrollment study anytime soon?
Yeah, we have definitely talked about that.
Okay, good.
To try to get a better handle, right,
All right.
on really.
More for future planning.
Quite,
and-
actually,
and
to
based
address
on-
your question
Yeah.
too, right, like what it looks like really in future years.
Are you going to use the same firm?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, the irony is that if I
Yeah,
recall
right.
We
correctly.
can't, that's true.
cannot.
We can't.
Why would
doesn't-
You can't do that, okay.
Well, no, but the person who, Bob, if I recall correctly, the person who
exactly
did
right.
this study 10 years before this one was dead on
Yeah.
with the number, the same person.
I mean, remarkably,
Yeah.
remarkably targeted, yeah. And there were some unknowns here over this period of time, right? The introduction of full-day kindergarten and the introduction of a brand-new high school. There's some thoughts that may have mitigated some of our enrollment issues a little bit.
And also the
Families.
development of several special ed programs.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a number of factors that are at play here, we suspect.
We do have to plan, was it Wheat and Lakes that had big fourth grade classes
I-
recently, right?
Believe so, yes.
There was,
And I could
there
even-
was one facility that had a.
That's right.
Last year was third grade.
That's
I
right.
remember
And,
that.
and we have that, right? I mean,
Right.
we'll have a bubble class, so to speak,
Right.
over grades, but then
Moving
it'll show
forward.
up sometimes in particular schools, right? And there'll be adjustments that then have to happen with teachers.
Right.
It's not unusual in a given year that a fourth grade teacher next year becomes a third grade teacher to address some of that, or within a school. Yeah.
You can adjust
Thank you
the
for the
catchment
pause.
areas.
What?
Thank you for the pause, allowing the pause.
No problem. All right. So the Board of Education is bringing to you tonight a budget we voted on this past Monday of $61,778,459. This is an increase of $1,227,628 and represents a 2.03 percentage increase. The budget that was brought to the Board of Education reflected a 2.14% increase. And over a period of 2 meetings, the Board of Education spent a good deal of time deliberating over a number of line items in this budget, which you received, I believe, the budget revisions in your packet, and I will just note them briefly. We made both reductions and a couple of additions. reduction, a $90,000, this was just a salary correction in the special education budget. We reduced the budget by $50,000, which had been allotted for maker spaces. Let me note here that this deliberation, these reductions, some additions were made with public comments in mind that came to us both public forum budget nights at the end of January, as well as some emails. I think there is interest in the idea of maker spaces. There is concern that it is not yet a fully developed idea. And so we are going to put a pause on that. Artists in residence, we are reducing that by $10,000. This is a small amount. This artists in residence was introduced this year, a $10,000 expenditure in response to some parents coming to us requesting additional art time at the elementary school level. We, at the moment, are providing art per state guidelines. There are members of the public who would like us to provide even more on a weekly basis. And we will note that one of the biggest barriers to doing that at this moment is literally time in the day. Given the curriculum, we introduced, added additional music a couple of years ago. We are literally banging up against time in the day. So this was an attempt to try to introduce additional art in a creative way. We did also hear from the public some concerns about the way that is being rolled out. So we are taking a year to really put some more time into that program before we add additional funds. Facilities truck. There is a reduction of $33,000 from the original proposed budget. We are going to lease that plow truck and take that savings at the moment. $35,000 reduction in what we will expect will be some retirement savings, and $50,000 from the medical. So this sums $268,000 in reductions that the Board of Ed took from the proposed budget. And then I will note a couple of additions. One, mentioned a little bit earlier tonight, $45,000 to the pension line to fund that at the recommended level. I will note that Dr. Freeman's budget was developed prior to knowing what that recommended level was, so this is the ability to add to fully fund that. $6,000 to go to the boys swim team transportation. We heard a very energetic and persuasive group of some of our high school young men talk about their swim team experience. They are in a co-op right now with North Haven. That is expecting to end soon, but parents and families are funding a good deal of their participation in that team and asked for our support, and we would like to provide that. And lastly, you will see an addition of $150,000 to the tuition line. I'm going to talk about that a little more in an upcoming slide, but members of the Board of Education are particularly concerned about how hard it is to predict that line and the trend for us over the last several years in which we come in regularly over budget on that line, and this is an attempt to really address that preemptively.
Could you comment on the retirement savings? It seems like a modest amount.
It is a modest amount because we are looking at staff reductions. And so we are not expecting, right? So when you make staff reductions, particularly if attrition doesn't help us, the people that are then let go are those at the bottom of the salary scale. So we're not, those are accounted for obviously as we look at the salary lines for next year, but you don't gain retirement savings from that group of folks. And because we may gain, our hope certainly is to have some of those positions be folks who are leaving per attrition, but it won't, we don't expect it to have the same impact as it would be if we were looking at 6 kind of people retiring at top step.
Was there a number associated with this? 3, 2,
Yeah, right.
1?
Again, it depends.
It depends on what their level is.
It's so
and-
hard, right?
and-
There's never an exact number, right?
Yeah.
If it's someone at top step and we can hire someone towards a bottom step, then you're looking at a good amount of money. As I think we've noted to you before, there are particular positions that are harder to fill, and positions, often STEM type positions, where you're much apt to fill it at a higher level coming in anyway. So you don't realize the same amount of savings.
Did the board take into account unemployment for the FTEs that will be let go?
That was part of the reasoning behind flat funding the unemployment line, is that there could possibly be some claims coming for unemployment.
Yeah.
Where we didn't spend it this year, we flat funded it for the coming year, just in case.
I have a question about this artists in residence.
Sure.
And the question is, what comparisons have you drawn between Guilford and neighboring districts in terms of art education at the elementary school level? Are we, it's one thing to meet state standards, it's quite another thing
Absolutely.
to be, I don't want to say cutting edge.
Right. No, absolutely. So I will say that the administration has done a really very careful look at that and has provided us with, I would say, a good 30 towns here in Connecticut, looking both at the length of the school day of each of these towns, since again, as I've noted, part of our issue, or a good part of our issue, is time in the schedule, and noting the amount of art provided per week. We in Guilford at the elementary level have a elementary school day that's 6 hours and 25 minutes long, and provide 40 minutes of art instruction, formal art instruction, a week. I say it that way because there is a fair amount of art that happens in other subjects per the teacher. The mean across these, again, I'm making a visual guess, about 30 schools, the mean art instruction time per week is 48 minutes across these schools, but some of these schools have a student day that is 6 hours and 50 minutes long, which is 25 minutes more a day, or a little more than 2 hours a week. So we are quite comparable is the short answer to your question, but we have indeed done some looking
And that's
across
comparable
many
with
districts.
Durgay and these schools. So,
Right, that's an important caveat. Yeah, thank you.
They're like school systems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions at the moment? All right. So this slide is giving you a history of increases. You'll note that for some time we have brought forth budgets that have had decreasing increases over time, right? I will note again that the budget this year at 2.03% increase is coming to you at that level largely because of the board's concern about this tuition line. We would really like to fund that appropriately. I say that very carefully because Linda Trudeau and her department, as well as our special services director, work extraordinarily hard at predicting this number every year based on actual students, as well as some expectations in terms of contingency. But as you can imagine, we're bringing forth this proposed budget right now in February, and we could have a child with particular needs show up to us next May, right? So it's just hard. So the decision on the board, again, after several meetings of deliberation, was to bring forth this budget at 2.03% so that we could add money to that tuition line that we think is going to be spent next year.
So some of the efficiencies that we've discussed already come from areas such as salaries, where again, because of enrollment decline, we've reduced full-time teaching equivalents. We've every year look at our hiring within the district and try to be as efficient as we can, try to utilize our FTEs as best we can and schedule them appropriately. For example, in like certification areas, if we can use someone at Adams for part of the day and the high school part of the day, it becomes a full-time position versus hiring 2 part-timers from that, which keeps continuity within the district. Our medical benefits are below this year, upcoming year, this year, right, are below our 14-15 levels. And that's a result of the hard work that my colleagues on the board have done and negotiating with the various unions and the work that the unions have done, quite honestly, to work with us in terms of the plans that we've developed over the course of the last few years.
And with all the work that the town has done as well.
And the town side, correct. I mean, it really makes a big difference. And to see our levels this year come in at that rate, you always cringe when you look at where the medical benefits are, because you never know from year to year. So that was a huge part for us to have a very efficient budget. Also on supplies and materials, because of, again, reduced enrollment, we've made adjustments. We manage our budget very carefully, and you'll see how that's broken out within each school in a few minutes. So again, the history of medical spending, we are at $8.9 million for the upcoming school year, which again puts us well below where we were back to 14-15. As I said, we're seeing reductions at a majority of the schools in the district. I'll note that the increase at Lakes is because of furniture that we're purchasing that is more flexible furniture. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's allows kids to work much like adults at work, where some people like standing at their desk. Kids like sometimes to be on the floor with a small table with them. And we've piloted it in some of our schools, and it's been very successful. You may walk into a classroom, if you visit a classroom, and you won't see traditional desks in there. You'll see chairs and various places and kids on the floor and doing their work, much like they would at home. So Lakes is taking that on, and we're going to supply them with that increase. Note that the decreases, especially at the high school, AMS, LEAT, Cox, and so forth, those are because we generally have a formulary based on student enrollment that's associated with it. So as we've had a decline in student enrollment, the supply needs have decreased. The technology reduction was, Linda, was because of the...
So the technology lease that is proposed in the budget is a $350,000 lease. The prior year, the year that came off of the payment schedule, was a $500,000 lease. So that results in a decrease for technology.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
Probably more of a community question when you look at perception is when you say Lakes is getting the furniture. Is it fair to say that Lee, Cox, and Jones have that furniture already, or is this, because you did mention that those schools had piloted some of that?
One of the schools, the district got a grant, I believe, from the Guilford Foundation.
I guess if I was a community member,
I believe it was.
and have a student going to Jones, be like,
Right,
oh, why is
no,
Lakes
no,
getting
no.
all of it?
No, I believe that,
Is it balanced
that
out?
Guilford Lakes, I believe it was GFFE, was it not?
Yes, yeah.
The Guilford Fund for Education,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there was a grant awarded to a teacher at Lakes to give this a try. So that first introduction was made there. It was really quite successful. So that this is an attempt to try it now in several classrooms at Lakes, much like other initiatives we've tried at particular elementary schools. If we find it successfully supporting students and instruction and approaches to kind of creative ways for teachers to group kids, et cetera, we will try to roll it out across schools, but it really is an opportunity to expand this initial pilot at Lakes.
And many of the schools have already done it without any increase. I mean, obviously, at Lakes, there's going to have to be some specialized furniture for the student population that they have there and the programs that they have there. But Baldwin has many classrooms that, or at least several classrooms that have begun to implement this by taking existing furniture and modifying them.
So the cost drivers of this budget, as you can see, the salary increase for this year is $743,000, and the tuition increase is $408,000. Those together are $1,152,000. Remind you that the total budget is going up $1,227,000. What you don't see here is if you add in the increase on just one account, if you add in the increase for the pension line, which is $160,000, that brings that total cost driver up to $1,312,000, meaning that all other accounts in the budget result in a net decrease of $84,728, offsetting that increase by that much.
What this slide shows, and we show this every year, this is, and I'm going to get back now to the special education costs. What you see is a blue line at the bottom. My apologies, it's probably hard to see for some, which identifies budgeted amounts for our special education expenditures. This includes tuition and in-house special education expenditures. The red squiggly line, for lack of a better word, is the actuals at the end of any given year. You will note that while we have kind of trended in terms of direction with some accuracy for sure in terms of budgeting, the actuals have been regularly higher over the last 4 or 5 years. So I will repeat again, sorry, why the Board of Ed again really wanted to put some more money in this line. We are really concerned about being able to keep this trend up. The other important item on this chart, and Mr. Hoey may or may not appreciate that it has become the Hoey chart in Board of Ed lingo, is the straight line, which at the bottom left hand of the chart kind of represents the direction in which our spending was going before we started to really in a focused and committed fashion create in-home programs for as many of our students who have special needs, as many of those that could be met.
By in-home, you mean in district?
I'm sorry, in district.
Right.
My apologies. Yeah, thank you very much. In district. And so that is perhaps a projection of where our spending truly could be if we had not made the commitment both financially and to our students to try to keep as many of them in district and provide them with what we think is actually really full, in some cases, improved educational opportunities, improved supports with a win-win situation, because then they also get to stay in their community with their peers, and really that benefits everyone. So again, this is kind of a reminder of where we could be had the administration really not made that committed effort with the support of this community and the Board of Finance to bring those many of those students in district.
And this chart just shows tuition and expenditures, not transportation, correct?
No, it's.
Or does it include transportation?
Tuition, transportation, and
I
contracted
see.
services.
Okay.
It is the three costs
So
together.
they're all encompassed in that?
They're all
Yes.
encompassed in this. That's correct.
Great.
Can we get this presentation sent to us? Because it's not in,
Sure.
I appreciate it.
I believe these slides are also up on our website.
Okay, well, I'll get
But
them there
if not,
then.
I can email them to you
Yeah.
tomorrow. That's fine.
So as it's stated in the slide, this isn't a status quo budget. We are never satisfied with our successes. We're proud of our successes and the work that we do, but we always strive to be better and do better. We invest in continuous improvement, and we look, as I said, from year to year to improve not only our performance, but provide an atmosphere and an environment for our students to be successful as well. Our investments this year include a literacy coach at Adams Middle School and Guilford High School. Those positions are budgeted for as much as $90,000 each. However, we, in the last, and Linda can maybe expound upon this, we haven't hired at that level.
Right. Of the existing literacy and math coaches that we have in, none of them are at top step.
Now, what I would like to say about the Adams position and the high school position is this is a continuation of the build we've done in coaching over the past several years. It's moving along into the Adams and especially the high school. Mr. Macenta, I will know, has been asking for a literacy coach at the high school for the last 7 years, and he's getting it, so he's just, well, hopefully getting it, and he's ecstatic about it.
As unfortunately as he retires, that's right.
But he will be there.
It also includes a computer science teacher, technology teacher at Adams Middle School, budgeted for approximately $50,000, which will take on STEM responsibilities. That program will begin looking at things like robotics and coding for students at Adams and develop a program there. And our $20,000 commitment to continued professional learning that we began this year in science instruction at Adams that will carry over to the high school next year with the new science standards.
Jason, could you just elaborate on that a little? There's $20,000 for new science programs, or?
It's professional development for
professional
the
development.
science teams at Adams at the high school. There are new science standards that have come through in the last several years.
Okay.
It requires a lot of professional development because our curriculum has now been updated to reflect those changes.
Let me just understand, is it just like a block of maybe contracted coaching? They'll come and,
We're working with
is it
it.
outside coach services, or?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, for that, because it's very specific to that field.
okay.
Coordinated through Dr. Crystal's office, Dr. Freeman, and the department supervisor at the high school.
All right, thank you.
The staffing changes that we're projecting for next year, there's no change at the administrative level. At the teacher level, you'll see that the 6 positions of English language arts at Adams is going to be a reduction. That we have classroom teachers at Lakes and Jones, to Mrs. Galen's point, where we had some bubble classes that have moved through. Now we're seeing those reductions there. We're eliminating a reading intervention district-wide person as a 1.0 FTE. We are adding small FTEs to the high school, specifically making a 0.8 position in the school counseling department at the high school full-time, which goes back to the prior slides about, again, increasing our capacity to handle the growing needs of our students, the social emotional needs of our students at the high school. The world language at the high school, the math at the high school, those 0.4 positions are really a result of graduation requirements, the changes at the state level, and providing more class opportunities for our kids to be able to, our students to be able to access math classes and world language classes to meet that responsibility. Keep in mind that for every 0.2 is a class. We talked about the literacy coaches at Adams and the high school, the teacher, tech teacher, computer science teacher at Adams already, and we are adding, proposing a 0.2 increase for a music teacher at Lead, who currently is a 0.8. We'd like to make him full-time. He's done a lot of work, especially in the area of working with our special needs students, and we would really like to see that position go full-time. So you'll see within the teaching ranks, there's a reduction of 5.8 FTEs. We are recommending the elimination of one para, district-wide para, that reflects the 1.0 FTE, and we are recommending an increase of a 0.5 maintainer, specifically to be used at the high school, where if you've been there in the springtime and in the fall, there are several plantings and areas around the high school that really need to be maintained and have someone dedicated to be able to do that to the level that would reflect the investment that we made in the high school.
And if I can just take the opportunity, particularly for the viewing public who may not have heard this explanation, the 6 English language arts teachers at Adams Middle School sounds like a lot. We have 6 teams, 3 for each grade at Adams, so 3 teams of 7th graders, 3 teams of 8th graders. And the present structure, each team has 5 teachers, which includes 2 English language arts teachers, a science teacher, a math teacher, and a social studies teacher. As you can imagine, right, there are other specials that happen at the middle school. So again, over time, none of this will be instantaneous, but over time what will happen is with the reduction of 1 English language arts teacher off each of these 6 teams, there will be an adjustment in the provision of time that each of those core subjects is offered, right? So at the moment, kids get 70-minute blocks of instructional time per subject at Baldwin. They get 57 minutes per class at the high school, and they get 40-something, 42, something much smaller at the middle school, right? It really is a blip in a progression of time. So in terms of both structure, time in any particular subject, allowing teachers to really dive in more at a given time period. I just wanted to offer a little bit of explanation about why it is a targeted cut in that manner. It is well thought through.
Are you saying the 44 minutes then will grow?
Over time, right?
Over time,
And
over time.
I think, right, it's not necessarily going to be instantaneous, but there's work being done so that each of the, in science and math and social studies, right, that there will be an expansion of that. In addition, part of the importance of the literacy coach, particularly at Adams this year, is to support those changes, right? So they're going to be going from 2 English language arts periods to 1. So it's supporting staff in that transition as well. All right, we are also bringing forth a bonding request. You will note here that there are a couple of items on this request. Baldwin Middle School HVAC Phase 2. Phase 1 was conducted this past summer, 2019. This is Phase 2 of this project. You noted earlier, as you were reviewing financials for the Board of Education, a number of emergency service needs in terms of HVAC, particularly at Guilford Lakes. So there is, in this bonding request, money for that. Likewise, at Guilford Lakes, window and door upgrades, and then a small amount of money so that we continually can plan for these projects. So we are making a bonding request at $2,615,960. All right, so basically, I just want to bring this presentation to a close in terms of kind of summarizing where we think we are right now. We continue to be one of the most successful and most recognized school systems in the state by any measure, and we're certainly very proud of that. This past fall, Guilford High School was recognized as a National Blue Ribbon High School, one of only 4 schools in the state of Connecticut, the only high school in the state of Connecticut recognized as such. We have shown on standardized test scores, thank you, I'm being given a piece of paper because I can't even see that far, state accountability measures, college placements, arts, athletics. We are extraordinarily proud of what we have to offer our students, and certainly extraordinarily proud of what our students do with those opportunities. I will note 2018 data have identified Guilford as spending $17,437 per pupil, that puts us 81st in the state. So as one of the top school systems in the state, we are spending in the middle. That's really, I think, something that we constantly want to remind our community, our supportive taxpayers, that this is a big bang for the money they provide so that we can provide the kind of school system that we are able to. We maintain our focus on learning and instruction, and we continue to provide this kind of return on investment. So I thank you all for being here for this presentation and for receiving this budget, and take the opportunity to answer any additional questions you may have at this time.
First of all, thank you for all of your work across the board. Board of Education, staff, departments, everybody. Never gets old seeing these presentations. And the amount of work that goes into them. I know that we're going to have a chance in the first week of March at our meetings to ask a lot of questions. If there's anything burning right now by the Board of Finance, you could certainly ask the question. Otherwise, I know we want to get the town to come up. What's that?
Ask a short one.
If it's a short one, and
I think
yeah.
it's fairly short.
Okay.
I'm just curious, we might be hiring some coaches and someone for computer instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Would teachers that are caught up in the FTE reductions be considered first, or maybe their skills don't align?
So
or-
that's right. There's a skill alignment problem, right? So the position, for instance, at Adams, which is STEM, to provide things like coding instruction, et cetera, is not going to be met by
jive with
a language
English
arts
teachers,
teacher.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately. Right. All right,
Okay,
thank you
with
so
that,
very
thank
much.
you very much. We will move on to item number 7, which is now to receive the proposed town budget for fiscal year 2020-21. And we have handouts.
Well, it's
And
also on your board packs.
it's
but
on the board.
It's sometimes easier to make notes on
That's,
paper.
thank you. And invited to the table is our first selectman, Matthew Hoey.
Read all of this? Good evening again.
And Mary Jane, too. Yeah, no, never. Never.
Well, I know it's getting late. I could give you the Reader's Digest version of this if you'd like. You have all the documentation here, and I'll go through it and certainly entertain any questions anybody has during it, or if you want to save them for the end, that's fine, or for the next, for a couple of weeks out. It's my pleasure to submit the town's fiscal year 21 budget on behalf of the entire Board of Selectmen. So with whom we're here this evening, thank you for joining me for this floor. And I just want it noted that the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously this budget to you. So I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege here. Ken, I'd be remiss. This is the 28th budget the two of us have worked together on over the years. And it's been a pleasure doing it that entire time. And thanks for all the work you've done over the years and together on that. So.
Here. It's a lot of years.
It is. And I do believe you now hold the tenure, the record for tenure as a sitting Board of Finance member. I think you're there. I think you are.
Thank you.
The budget we're presenting to you totals from the town side $31,569,607. That's our total operating budget. Additionally, there's a debt service budget that's coming to you, which includes both the town and Board of Education projects in the amount of $10,495,185. We are not submitting any any projects for bonding on behalf of the town. We continue to be on a 2-year cycle, and this is the off year, if you will. One thing I just want to mention, there was an article in the paper today that noted that the town was proposing a 5% spending increase. The budget was a 5% spending increase on the town side budget. That is not the case. The town's operating budget is a 3.4% increase. That 5% comes once you start to layer in the debt service increases, which is really the third leg of the three-legged stool of our budget, town budget. And just for a little bit of background, you'll be able to pull this out of the presentation eventually. Department heads brought an operating budget request to us in the that amounted to a 4.43% increase. The Board of Selectmen had scaled that back to a 2.9%, and that's just on the operating items. The capital request totaled 155% increase over the current year's budget, and we cut that back down to 20.47%. And I know many of you were at the workshops when those projects were discussed, and I think you'll understand the importance of some of them when we get to that. So, with that, let me get into the program. I know the Board of Education always starts off with a mission statement, so we had to take the pressure was it's been on, for years. I've always seen that and said, oh, geez, that would be nice to know that. So, and what is the mission of the town of government? It's to provide services, and how do we categorize those? Public protection and safety, maintaining our infrastructure. A variety of town services that people have come to rely on. Quality of life is a key component of the community's expectations from government. Support for the Board of Education in many fashions, as well as economic development, tourism, to continue to make Guilford a viable place and a desirable place for people to live, work, and spend their leisure dollars. What were our budget objectives? And again, you guys can read all of these, but I'll briefly run through them. We strive to maintain a high level of services in the face of increased demand and, over the years, uncertainty in state funding. We strive to provide essential safety and public protection services. We continue to insist on funding pension liabilities at actuarially recommended levels, right, Bob?
Indeed.
And one thing that is of note, will probably be in here a little bit later, we are doing that while at the same time this year lowering the discount rate to 6.25. And I know that that's near and dear to Bob's heart from his days on the pension, and we've taken it from about a 7.5% several years ago down to 6.5%.
That's right.
Which more accurately reflects what the market can actually produce for us.
Expectations.
Exactly. We continue to make investments in information technology, and I think you've heard me say that for many years we had failed to do that, and we continue to try to catch up. Again, we continued investment in maintaining infrastructure on roads, chip sealing, paving. One of the big things we're starting to see, based on the amount of rainfall we've had over the last couple of years, are drainage problems, and those continue to show up. We insist on protecting the tax relief programs for the veterans, the elderly, and the disabled. This budget continues to fund the senior tax freeze at the current levels, and you'll see some numbers later on in terms of how many families benefit from that. We continued capital project funding within the operating budget. Jonathan, I know this is something you're always anxious to see. What can we spend? What can we put in the operating budget rather than go out to bond? We also continue, this is a pay-on to Joe Mazza. We budget without reliance on revenues from the unassigned fund balance. We continue to hold on to that mantra. My colleagues on the Board of Selectmen had suggested a couple of things that we wanted to make sure people understood based on what we heard from the department level budgets. There are some demographic shifts that are increasing demands on certain departments. As we gray, and I'm a victim of that myself, just look at the color of my hair. As we get older, there are more services being demanded of social services. Social services is seeing significantly more of the elderly population, not just the lower income or the disadvantaged folks. As in the other place where we're seeing wild growth and demand for services is through the senior programs at the Park and Rec. Obviously, a key factor is debt service. We have about $1 million increase in debt service. Everyone knows about that as the last big bump for the high school. The education cost sharing formula has remained stable this year. It has been under attack year after year, but because of the biennial budget that was passed last year, we're only seeing a modest decrease in ECS funding. a significant impact here is the SAFER grant. As you may recall, there was a graduated payment schedule 4 from the feds on the SAFER grant to support the 8 new firefighters. The budget that we're currently in funded 9 months at 70% of the salaries and 3 months at 35%. Next year, in the proposed budget, it will be 9 months at 35% and 3 months at 0. So that's a big impact on this budget. Also, one of the key factors, we've increased staff levels by a half a position, and you'll see the details on that. Okay, the operating budget, as you can see here, consistent with what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we're looking for a little over $862,000, or a 2.9% increase on the operating. The capital budget, $174,447, or 20.47%, for a total of 3.4%. Well, I just want to take a minute on the capital budget. For those who may remember, we used to budget over $1 million on our annual capital budget and the operating budget, and that last year dipped to $852,000. So I think it has long been a goal to keep that over $1 million. And in fact, that 852 was the lowest amount that we had budgeted in capital since 2013. So. Debt service, this is the number everyone's talking about, and the good news is that 10.9, that's the last, right? I think you saw the chart. Next year, it's going to be flattened out. One of the things that I wanted to comment on the refunding, and again, Bob, thanks for your assistance in that, in driving that initiative, is because of that, as we have seen over time, the diminished reliance on premiums and not as many premiums, those reductions will virtually replace what we had been spending in premiums. So I think there's a great opportunity coming over the next couple of years with that. I mentioned that the Board of Selectmen was presented with budget increases, operating increases of 4.43%, and many of those, not many, some of those did not actually. I think I can see a little better over here. Sorry. I'm falling victim to the same thing. To the same thing, right? Okay, there we go. That's better. That's much better. All right. Out of the departmental budgets, the selectmen cut nearly $177,000. Capital budget. I think you might call that taking an axe to it. And a lot of that some of that gets moved. As you're all aware, we have a 5-year capital program in place, and a good number of these items got moved into subsequent years. And we also use some existing funds, some reserve funds, and some bond funds to accomplish some of those projects.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in one of our other meetings, that we had some savings in some of our bond authorizations, so we're able to use those savings for like projects, and that's why we're able to make these reductions in capital.
And as you see in the employee benefits, we made a significant reduction, because we had some reserve money in the reserve for personnel. So I think we talked about this a little bit at the workshop. So we reduced it by the amount we had available in the reserve account. Now, the other side of the coin is increases in the budget, the major increases. Salaries continues to drive the day. This is similar to what we saw from the Board of Education. Salaries and benefits constitute $875,000 of those increases. One thing I want you to note, as those of you who were at the budget workshop, the individual department budgets were shy of a component, which was the raises in salaries. What we did for the purpose of evaluation here is to move the amount we had in reserve for personnel back into the salary line item, so you'd see what the overall effect on salaries were. Anticipated effect, if you will. And then obviously the employee benefit line. So those two constitute the majority of our increase in the operating budget. All other operating expenses outside of salaries and employee benefits decreased by $13,000. I mentioned a minute ago that we were talking about an increase of employees in a half a position. We are increasing the park and recreation receptionist to full-time as a result of what you heard. The demand for interactions with our senior population is growing to the point where we can no longer staff it with a half-time receptionist. It's essential that we, in order to continue to provide the service and keep the burden of answering repeated phone calls and doing front desk kind of stuff from our staff, our professional staff. We are the police department is eliminating one municipal animal control officer. Yet on the other side, we are adding a public works maintainer, maintainer 3. For those who are at the budget workshop, the Public Works Commission is strongly suggesting that we add 2. We are not, the Board of Selectmen was not prepared to go to 2. There will be some consideration for maybe another one next year, but that case will need to be made once again next year, so we decided to move on with 1. And the net change to the budget is an increase of $28,528. There's one other note I want to make. We increased some of what was known as the contractor line item in the building department for folks doing building inspections. However, you'll note, I think you may remember in the budget presentations at the workshop, that the way we used to account for that person was as a contractor, but in all actuality, he's an employee. So I think you see it on the detail. The contract line in building went to 0, and the part-time employees was reversed. We had absorbed what we were spending last year, but we're adding 8 hours a week to that.
Our recollection is that the contractor was also generating revenue, though.
Right,
Yes.
and still will be.
Yes, and still will be.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the change in the employment status doesn't impact that?
No, it does not.
We're just,
No, it does not.
the budget reflects the true expense for that at this time, because the high school project is not covering the expense like it had been.
I see.
And one of the things that the Board of Selectmen spent a good deal of time on in our workshop was, at what point do we go to hiring a full-time employee versus the part-time, the contractor-like status, right? Because we're paying contractor rates. And we've committed to take a review of that over the course of this year. And quite honestly, I think we have enough money budgeted for the contracted rates to cover a full-time employee, probably not the benefits piece, but nevertheless the full-time salary. So, the increases in employee benefits, as you can see, $150,000, and it falls out basically retirement plan contributions, medical benefits, and other, which is largely FICA. All right. On the flip side, the increases in the operating budget, the building department, that's the salaries that we just talked about, bringing the salary line item in. In capital, I won't bore you to tears, but I think you guys can, the detail is in the 5-year capital plan and also in your materials. Fire department is largely safer grant. The Public Works is the new position, and then employee benefits, we saw that on the last slide. We can run through this and take a look at it quickly. These are the reductions in the operating budget, and most significant is legal, and that's largely because we have a significant amount of money set aside in this current operating budget to get us through the 5 contracts that are currently being negotiated. We've just started negotiating. And also, the declining rate of tax appeals, the farther you get away from reval, allows us to budget less. I'll give you an example. I just signed off on a legal bill on an appeals case that's going to court, and the cost to the firm was about $10,000. And this is obviously a very big appeal, and we were at quite a wide discrepancy between our assessment and theirs. So that can add up pretty quickly. All right, components of the capital budget, here we go, Board of Selectmen, you're gonna say, I think there's a vehicle in there, I know there's a vehicle in there. The building also has a vehicle, plus there are some equipment that they need for the testing equipment, as well as they're absorbing the cost for some printing for the entire Town Hall South building. Communications is IT related, an upgrade in the IT system. The engineering is sidewalks and also a new vehicle. The fire department is largely in equipment, replacing the air packs and those kind of things that need to be done, as well as a new pickup truck to replace the 2005 pickup truck that I think they have there now. Back to capital. This is Mary Jane's favorite graph, which shows, well, no, it isn't. This is your second favorite graph. That's right.
The debt one is my favorite.
And again, this shows that, back in 2015, off of the 2011 budget, where we had gotten to a low of under $500,000 in capital. And we were steadily able to increase that, but some of the budgetary pressures over the last couple of years drove it down, and we're pleased to see it back up over $1 million. On the operating side, and again, the operating side is a little bit more of an estimate, but you'll see that the local revenues are up dramatically, $430,000. Interest income, although if we hear Mr. Livesey talk much longer, we may have to revise that number a little bit, but that's the bond market. The building
I
permits.
just note Sandy is here tonight. I always say Sandy's the one that manages all of our investments and makes sure that every dollar we can put into our investments gets done. So Sandy is largely to thank for that.
Right.
That's Sandy, yes. Not that one over there.
Sandy Ruoff in math? No, not so much?
Well, this one is excellent.
Sandy or Freddie, I will make that clearer.
That's right, that's right. Building permits is up dramatically. As you may recall, we instituted a new system on building permit fees, and we're already starting to see the benefit of that. Once again, I want to remind folks, that effort was just to get us in line with the methodology and the rates that most communities in the state of Connecticut, particularly those of our neighbors, are currently employing. Town clerk revenues are up, and those are largely on recording fees. EMS revenue, fire department is anticipating a bit of a jump, and the rest of it's pretty much flat. On the state side, you'll see that state grants remain, we're picking up an additional $10,000 based on the biennial budget. Teachers' retirement grant comes out. I want to applaud this board for the conservative approach they took last year in the face of potentially drastic cuts to state funding, both on the ECS side and the imposition of the teachers' retirement fund. So the good news is the operating revenues were healthy. The local operating revenues and the state stuff has kept us relatively flat. I apologize for the typo. 255% growth in taxable personal property is obviously not correct. That's a 25.26%. But the grand list grew by 1.18% over last year. And that would generate, at today's mill rate, an additional $1.1 million in tax revenue. This is more informational than anything. Our total grand list, we continue to see the way it is split out between real estate, motor vehicles, personal property, and then even within real estate. Real estate constitutes about 90% of our tax revenues, and 90% of those residents are coming from, those taxes are coming from the residential property taxes, with the balance being at 9% on commercial and virtually nothing on vacant farm and open space. This is more detail on the state stuff, which you can go take a look at your leisure. I don't think we need to waste your time on that today. Let me go back one. All right, the debt service that we've been talking about, And this does not include the EPC lease, which is a completely separate line item under debt service. The new high school constitutes 44% of the debt service. Other school debt is 22%, and the town's portion of it is 34%. This is Mary Jane's favorite graph. As you can see, we are at the crest, and this includes the refunding.
Yes.
This includes the most recent refunding, and
The anticipated savings on the refund.
exactly. And even though Mary Jane has that little window box there that says opportunities for new debt with no budgetary impact, yes, that's the case. We can afford to add debt to it, but I'm going to give Jonathan a shout out. There's an opportunity for us to not necessarily add to that line. I don't, we need to be judicious about it.
I can throw some statistics at you, and, Connecticut, just bonding, not just debt, not pensions, just bonding. Connecticut ties Alaska with being the most exposed per capita to bonds, with Rhode Island a distant third. And yet, that's only 13.8% of the Connecticut budget, which we don't think is terribly well run. And our debt service on bonds is 10.1%. It's high. That's over $5,000 per person in town, and the average in Connecticut is $2,300 per person. So we're, even though we're borrowing at great rates, it's still a lot of debt. So I commend the Board of Selectmen for amping up the capital spending again to replace that and focus on current spending rather than just pushing everything down the line.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that.
And I'll just note that